In April 2020, just as the COVID pandemic hit the UK, a group of local community leaders got together to help develop the new 5-year homelessness prevention strategy for Greater Manchester, using a process called legislative theatre. First, artists and activists with experience accessing homelessness services trained together over Zoom.
Good morning, computer.
Good morning, Job Centre Plus minion. How are you?
I'm good. Well, till I saw the crowd.
Well, get on with it. The list's not getting any shorter.
Hiya, love.
Take
You okay?
seats. I've got some fantastic news.
Great.
Here. I've got you a job.
Great.
Tomorrow morning in Oldham at 6 a.m.
It's construction. I didn't put construction down.
Well, we paid for a CSR card and you've had
6.
At least.
6 jobs in construction in 6 months.
It is, and that's why I put on my job search. I didn't really want construction, you know, due to my mental health as well.
Mental health.
Yeah.
Mental health.
This is where it's entirely on you. You have the authority, you have the discretion. Does this seem like a mental health issue?
Have you got a diagnosis?
Really powerful intervention, and I got her to see how she's been trapped in that victim mentality, and now she's gonna get herself out of that and empower herself. Oh yeah, no, I know I'm good at that. Yeah, okay, I'll see you in a bit.
You getting furniture?
Not yet, no, but there's a charity help.
Well, just when you do get your furniture, you make sure you don't mark the walls or scuff the floors, because then you carpets and floors.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and please don't leave stuff lying about.
Yeah, it was a gift package from Housing First.
Yeah,
welcome pack.
Yeah, well, what it is, we don't usually accept your type of people, you know. So we just done it because of what was incentives. That's all. So we don't want any drug users around. You know what I mean? We don't want police coming to the door.
Questioners, are you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, bid.
Can you increase last year's targets by 200%?
500.
Is this programme evidence-based?
Of course, they always have lots of evidence.
Which people are you supporting?
The ones that deserve it.
Can you begin yesterday?
Of course, the day before.
Cheers, yeah, I've come in because I need to apply for different housing. I've got shared access to my children, but with only 1-bedroom flat, can't even fit in if we go in the lounge. So I need to apply to get some other sort of housing as soon as possible, please.
Okay, that's fair. Have you got any paperwork ready to show me you are allowed to have the kids?
With this funding, we could just expand it and help so many more people.
Oh, bless you. No, you did a fantastic bid, but I am just sorry you do not meet our funding criteria. These
All right, assistant, you're fired. I'm re-putting your wage into a commissioning team to help all of the contestants put their own bid together without needing the.
The commissioning process and commissioners feel very inaccessible to people who are experiencing services. So something that can connect them up more meaningfully. And I like the idea of making that kind of mandatory and annual. I think probably we could aim for something a bit more ambitious than annual. That's kind of structured into ongoing processes.
I wonder why we never asked people to set their own outcomes that they would bring to the table as well, and specifically with reference to being influenced and informed by people who use their services.
The proposals from all these events fed into the Housing First pilot in Greater Manchester, as well as the Greater Manchester Homelessness Prevention Strategy.
Hello, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining together. So today we're interviewing the main responsibles and some of the participants of the Legislative Theatre for Greater Manchester Homelessness Prevention Strategy, who has been awarded with this 16th IOPD Award Best Practice in Citizen Participation. So first of all, congratulations to all team participants and all the stars of this project. So first of all, I want to introduce you, and just to start this conversation, I really invite you to introduce yourself, introduce your position and responsibilities on the team and on the project. So give you the floor.
Okay, hi, I'm Molly Bishop. I'm the strategic lead for homelessness at the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. Katy?
Hi, I'm Katy Rubin. I am a legislative theatre practitioner who helped design and lead on this project, also based in Manchester. I'll pass it over to John.
Hi there, I'm John, and I care about where ethics and art overlap with money and control. And I'll pass it to Nadia.
Hi, I'm Nadia Masood, and I'm part of Legislative Theatre and also with GMCA. I'll pass it on to Tabz.
Thanks, Nadia. Hi, I'm Tabz O'Brien. I'm also part of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, working really closely with Molly around homelessness and multiple disadvantage. And I was part of the homelessness prevention strategy development and the legislative theatre work as well with all these guys.
Okay, thank you all for this presentation. Thank you, Matt. So before going deep to the experience, if you can briefly introduce a little bit about the socioeconomic background of the Greater Manchester, especially the context of homelessness in the metropolitan area.
Yes, I'll do my best without my notes. So here goes. So Greater Manchester is a city region in the north of England. We've got just under 3 million people living here. And it's an area that used to have lots of industry that's declined since the 1980s. So across the region, there's pockets of real concentrations of wealth, but there's also a lot of deprivation and poverty across the city region, and that continues to play out in terms of risk of homelessness and people experiencing homelessness, really kind of deeply divided by lines of poverty and inequalities. We as a kind of municipal region, Greater Manchester is made up of 10 local areas that have collaborated together for a very long time, but that's been formalised since 2009 with the first devolution deal into Greater Manchester that was subsequently built on through 2014 to 2017. And in 2017, we gained the position of a regional mayor. So really, that kind of plays a bit of a key part in the story of the response to a regional response to homelessness in Greater Manchester.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if someone else wants to add something or.
I think I'd put it as like the Greater Manchester region saw the birth of Marxism and the death of industry. And what we're living with now is the just the end point of polarization, where there's lots of property in resource in the hands of very, very few. And it's like how we're managing that. It's still kind of in its infancy, but it's still a real problem, has been for a long time.
Great. Okay, so now regarding more focus on the homeless situation in Greater Manchester. Previous to this experience, how the city or the authority has been managing the question of homelessness, also at national level in England and United Kingdom. So what has been the policies regarding this topic?
Okay, I'll kickstart on that, but again, jump in afterwards, guys. So in England, there is legislation that provides a safety net for people who are at risk of homelessness and experiencing homelessness. It's a safety net that is imperfect and has a fair few holes in it, and it basically looks at whether or not I'll start that again. So since 2017, we've had legislation that brings a couple of different duties on a local authority level. So there's quite localised practice around homelessness prevention and homelessness relief as national legislation, but what that looks like in different local areas can be quite different in terms of how it's interpreted and what's provided. So the basic support is for anybody who's at risk of homelessness within a certain time period, and if anybody is experiencing homelessness. So there's a universal offer there of support, but the offer of temporary accommodation for people who are actually experiencing homelessness is only there if people meet certain thresholds and your nationality and status come into play, your experience and kind of vulnerability, certain social vulnerabilities as assessed by an individual come into play. So for that reason, there's fairly strong kind of provision compared to a lot of other countries, but it does have a fair few gaps and holes in it, and we've seen a rise in rough sleeping nationally through the 2010 years, through the years of austerity in England and in the UK, that really correlates or shows up the gaps in the legislation in terms of people often who are experiencing kind of more multiple disadvantages, or who have been through and had some support previously and it hadn't worked for them, being denied access to kind of that basic right to housing and shelter that we think everybody should have. So yeah, that's kind of the legislative position in the UK. Well, in England actually, because Wales and Scotland are quite different.
Thank you, Molly. Again, okay, Katy, please.
Yeah, I'll chime in, I think, and Molly and Tabz and John, everybody correct me if I'm wrong, but I think part of the sort of history of this is that with the combining of the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, right, and the new mayor, there was also combating homelessness in the region, right, in the Combined Authority was a priority. There was the development of a Greater Manchester Homelessness Action Network, which is a really unique intersector network that has members of, charity sector, local authorities, combined authority, people with lived experience of homelessness, who were already regularly coming together. And as Molly said, sort of originally they spent their first part of the new mayor's term and of this Homelessness Action Network looking at immediate response, right? Urgent response. So just rough sleeping and how people can have what they call a bed every night here. And then the mandate for the next year or year plus of that Homelessness Action Network was to look at prevention. And I think that one of the strong threads that came through from this Homelessness Action Network and from Mayor Andy Burnham was the emphasis on what they call here co-production, right? Which is another term about sort of participatory processes, and specifically in relation to policy and practice and public practice. So there was, I think, one of the things that made this project have a really strong base was that developed Homelessness Action Network that was already intersector, already meeting regularly, already had a lot of buy-in and a lot of energy, and a track record of doing things successfully around the emergency response, and now needed to look at the prevention, right, long term. And I think, and maybe someone can chime in here, just setting us up for the next stage. There are so many challenges to strong and effective co-production or participatory democracy, and I think that that in coming into this next stage of prevention, looking at prevention, right, the Homelessness Action Network with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority, which is part of that intersector network, was really looking at how can we, do co-production in ways that have even more impact and teeth, and maybe address some of the challenges that the GMCA and the Homelessness Action Network and generally, right, these kinds of processes already were facing. Anybody want to add on to that?
I'd just say, because the whole kind of remit of the question is around why a prevention strategy and why now. So I think the lead into that is kind of twofold, as I've mentioned, around legislation changing in 2018 and requiring areas to look more at prevention, and then that building a real kind of narrative around the importance of prevention in homelessness support, and new areas of work there. And then on the flip side, you've got the political kind of priority here, which was growing. It was on people's minds. They wanted to see things happening differently. As we said, there was a massive rise in rough sleeping across Greater Manchester through the 2010s, and the mayoral election 2017 kind of brought that feeling together. And the Mayor, Andy Burnham, won on a mandate to really address homelessness and rough sleeping, and the way in which he wanted to do that, and the way in which he felt, he was voted in to do that, was by working across sectors, by listening to people, by getting, really close to some of these issues and dealing with them in ways that, as the Mayor of Greater Manchester, there's more opportunity to kind of convene and think about challenges slightly differently than council leaders might be able to, for instance. So providing that challenge to the system, so that kind of political mandate and sponsorship got us into this space, and that's where the strategy work has come from. We've lost Nadia. I hope she's okay.
Yeah, hopefully she'll.
Okay.
She'll come back. Yeah.
I'll
check. Might be tech.
She disappeared. Yeah. Well, in case, thank you very much for this introduction on the background, on the objective. I think it's was very, very interesting and very enlightenment. So now, if we can go deep to the process, to the experience of the legislative theatre, if you can exactly introduce this experience, how it worked. The methodology, the different sessions, and so please go ahead with the presentation.
Okay, I'll start, and then John, if you want to jump in on how we worked. So legislative theater as a methodology comes out of Brazil originally. As we know, lots of participatory democracy comes out of Brazil originally, including participatory budgeting. And it's part of the tools of Theater of the Oppressed that were created or sort of cultivated in Rio by Augusto Boal, and started really practicing legislative theater in 1990. But then there's been a bit of a gap really in implementation, although it's slowly been practiced in other places around the world. And it's been growing quite a bit now, I think, in the UK as well as in other countries. And the idea basically is that it starts with people who are directly impacted by the problem. So they are the conveners of the process, people who are impacted by whatever problem it is that we're trying to address, and sort of designers of a participatory process. And it starts with creating a play that is articulating the problems that people are facing. And in specific, in relation to policy and practice. So unjust policy or ineffective or out of date or just missing, things that are missing, right? Opportunities that have not been filled because there's a gap between human experience and public policy and practice. So that's where legislative theater is trying to bridge that gap. And in the process, part of the process is about that group coming together, using games and exercises and tools to tell stories, find shared experiences, and build a play that articulates as best it can the human impact of the problem and also the various layers of bureaucracy or institutions around a problem, and then brings that play to an audience of stakeholders, other people directly impacted by the problem, people who help make decisions about the problem, policymakers, advocates, a really diverse audience, but an audience that all has skin in the game and is working on the issue from various perspectives. And then there's another sort of unique part of this process, unique to legislative theater, is that there's a chance to test new policies and practices through improvisation. So the actors, right, and in this process, actors are all residents, citizens or residents, people who are directly impacted by the problem, are prepared to improvise with audience members to test new ideas. And this builds solidarity around the impact of the problem, right, the feeling of the problem, but it also gets people thinking a little bit outside the box to come up with potentially more innovative and responsive, maybe more radical ideas. But really we're looking for responsive, and we're looking for a chance to trial them, not just talk about them, right? And the idea that in trialing them, we see what might not work, what still needs to be improved, what might, come up against a barrier, and so that you can continue to improvise and test ideas and get ever closer to what would really address the problem as best as we can. And in this process, I think which we often do in legislative theater, we thought really big. And we also thought small and specific about things that would work towards prevention in the short term and in the long term. And then everybody in the audience turns those improvisations into policy proposals. And maybe we'll talk more. You'll ask us about how we did this in COVID. It was a very unique challenge in 2020 and 2021. And those proposals get sorted by the advocates who are there, the policymakers, sometimes the actors using their expertise and their knowledge to sort 50 or 100 policy ideas into sort of 3 or 4 that we can work with for that event, and then pitch them back to the audience in the same event for refining, negotiation, amendments, questions, dissent, really trying to get not just about proposing ideas, but really towards how close can we get to implementation in this process. And then finally, there's a vote so that we can prioritize our actions and commitments to action. So policymakers who are there help us say, what they're going to do next. And we can talk about how those led into the prevention strategy. But yeah, I don't know, John, do you want to say anything about the kind of specific plays or the issues and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, a little bit, because for me, they say art is instruction by delight. Well, this was progress by discomfort. So it's like cramming those people in as small a room as possible and kind of contending with the mix of humanity with the most democratic tools you've got available, which looked a lot like games, moving around, constructing machines, articulating things in terms of shape and pictures and sounds, and being able to take away like a truth that we really weren't very good at, certainly from this nation, which is like, it makes complete sense to have people who've never experienced or never likely to experience a problem have complete control over the conditions, processes, and solutions. And for us, I think it takes ages to kind of build those spaces and populate them. And yeah, I think that a lot of the process was like kind of canvassing and trying to bringing people in and building up that confidence that they could do it. And it was banking on a lot that people were exhausted and wanted to do something different. And the kind of shortfall of charities and how we worked with those services, like there's in a sense, it was a bit of a dead end, that kind of power dynamic of recipient of charity and charitable institution, that doesn't necessarily lead to the kind of asks or what's the word, legislative changes that you're looking for, the structural changes. So it's like, I think maybe someone else can talk about how we got the diversity of actors in the room. And that includes Katy, Molly, and Nadia, because they're all involved in that.
Nadia, we welcome you. If you want to introduce yourselves, we're in the middle of it. If you want to introduce yourself,
I had so much trouble physically getting here, but trying to install the new Zoom, and so I'm sorry I'm this late.
Don't worry. We're just talking about, Molly gave lots of background about sort of Greater Manchester and the point to which GMCA got to implementing or working towards a homelessness prevention strategy and sort of the setup of that. And now we were talking about legislative theater specifically. So I was saying a little bit about the process, like how a legislative theater event works. And I think John was just asking if we want to talk about who the actors were and how we got that diversity of actors. That's a really great question. And maybe we can also talk about, the co-facilitation process that we did and how we did that. So can I pass it to you already?
Yeah. Okay. It's quite funny because when you say who the actors were, I remember I was an actor. Like I was that person once. And then I think my love for the power of legislative theatre made me want to then become a facilitator. So yeah, I'm Nadia Purcell. I'm a GM Joker. I'm a facilitator for legislative theatre. The actors are actually all pretty amazing, to be honest, and they come from all different backgrounds. They come with all their own experiences, and nothing is kind of there's like nothing goes untouched. So it's not like an actor can come with their experience and it's not appreciated, because everyone's experience is appreciated from whatever experience they've come with. We want it part of the narration. We want it part of the story in some way or another, without kind of throwing them into it too deeply. I was actually thinking about how long, so from the training up until where we are now, it's a really long time. So I was thinking back to, so for me, when I first met Katy, it was 2018. And then from the end of that year, we kind of just jumped straight into like legislative theatre, but then it was, let's start doing training. Let's train the facilitators. And that kind of came just as COVID kind of smacked us, really. Just as COVID came, the training came, but it was like, we don't want to stop, because if we stop, then the whole vehicle stops. The whole legislative theatre vehicle, it'll stop. So we pushed for the training online. We tried a few times. We tried in a football stadium, so then we were really aired out. And then we had a few training sessions at the Methodist church in town a few times. But really, it was online. But we stayed close, even though it was online, and it was quite tricky. We stayed close, and we practiced and we practiced and we practiced, and we trained and we trained and we trained, and we just helped one another, advised one another. And then the time came where it was time to put it together then. And then we were all like, oh, this is real life now. Like, it's not, even though it was still online, which I think was amazing, the fact that we were able to get a Zoom audience so big. Tabz were there, Molly was there. To have an audience so big and so involved and so like willing to involve themselves, even though it wasn't in person, I feel like for us was one of the accomplishments that we came away with. And then that's when we kind of co-produced the DWP, the commissioning play, and the song as well that we had. So I think when I look back at it, my perspective of it is like, wow, that was really, really long, but look where we are. And we have this tool that is just so powerful that sometimes when I say it or I speak about it to like my friends and my family, I'm like, you don't know what legislative theatre is? What? Like, you don't know what it is. You have to know what it is, and then I'll tell them then. But for me, I'm very prideful. I think all of us, everyone involved, jokers, actors, they're called like spectators, involved audience, actors, anyone who's just come to watch, you know, the even up to date, like the Oldham interview, people, you know, that have just watched, they have a different perspective of it. But I know all in all, legislative theatre, everyone's like, wow, you know, it's powerful, but they don't know how far back we've gone and how far we've come. Tabz and Molly, they do, because they were part of the audience online and then in person, so they've been on that little rocky road with us. I feel, have I covered everything? I feel like sometimes I get too personal with my legislative theatre, and sometimes I don't give it out to everyone. But if I've missed anything, then just let me know. I feel like
no, that was great.
I've touched everything.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the things you were mentioning. So we did 3 plays in this process, right? Cool. So, and that comes back to this Greater Manchester Homelessness Action Network, and the GMCA had already defined the 3 sort of main issue areas that felt that the whole network, the intersector network and the combined authority, felt were important for prevention. So that was what they call multiple disadvantage. So sort of intersecting challenges or needs that people have, right, might be around housing, might be around criminal justice involvement, might be around health and mental health, might be around addiction. And so that was one of the plays, was multiple disadvantage. So Nadia was talking about how one of the institutions that was being targeted there, or one of the areas of policy change, was about the Department of Work and Pensions, and really how people are, the process by which people have the opportunity to get new jobs, and the challenges in there that are relating to homelessness prevention. That was a big part of that play. And then the next play, which was really fascinating, was funding and commissioning. So essentially, what are the challenges in the cycle of funding homelessness services in Greater Manchester that could be improved or changed to prevent homelessness? And that was a lot about how those processes should be participatory. And we got really specific in the proposals about how funding, the commissioning cycle should be participatory from beginning to end and back again. And then the last play was about structural racism in its intersection with homelessness services. And there was issues there about immigration services, about policing, about really, again, all kinds of policy questions. And yeah, to this point about COVID, I think we had never done this before, and I had never done this before in any legislative theater process, but we had our actors in person and our audience online, and we had to bring in sound equipment, you know, everyone had body mics, we had a mixer. There were because there were about 10 people on stage in every play. So our whole audience was there, and then we would have people helping to sort the policy ideas, each on their own laptop in the room. But then we had, 100 people online watching, and a big screen. And then every time someone improvised with us on stage, they were just projected and pinned up on the Zoom screen. And we would improvise with the audience member who was at home, with us in the room. And when people submitted their policy ideas, they did that via the Google form, and they came into us in the room so we could sort them in real time right away on this big spreadsheet. And then we could pitch them back and say, you know, in the intermission, you've come up with 4 or 5 top ideas, and now we want to ask questions and get dissent. So it was really quite an effort, but the whole process was like that. And for us, it was really important. I mean, we did the training online, as Nadia said, and then the acting, it was important for us to do in person because the online didn't work for everybody. It wasn't accessible. It wasn't, and you know, it loses a lot of that fun. But to be 10 people in the room, you know, with masks or shields and distancing was safer for us than to be 100. So it really did work out. Okay, yes. Please, Tabz, COVID.
Yes,
no COVID.
I think looking back, we think, oh yeah, we did the kind of legislative theatre in person with all of the kind of things that we needed with the masks and everything, big spaces. Nadia's already mentioned the football stadium, and everyone online. But we didn't always plan it that way. So sometimes it changed within that week, or that like the day after, our government policy and restrictions and lockdowns changed, and local lockdown changed. So I think looking back, we see it as quite a structured, this is how we dealt with it in COVID, but it wasn't always kind of a planned situation. We would change from day to day, and it was quite quick responses that we had to deal with in the most trauma-informed way, in a way that people could engage with across the system, from commissioners to policymakers who were responding to a global pandemic, to people with lived experience who, some of which were still homeless or insecure accommodation, still facing the issues that they were already facing before the global pandemic. So it was an incredibly challenging circumstance. And I think one of the key challenges was around relationships. So the Legislative Theatre group did a fantastic job of bringing new people in. But that meant that we had a diversity of experiences, backgrounds, knowledge, skills, but we didn't have necessarily all pre-existing relationships that we can kind of use as a foundation to kind of do this work, build trust. And when you're bringing in policymakers, commissioners, people that who've been traumatized by a system, or have had bad experiences by the system, who have fallen through the gaps in systems, it's very hard to build trust and relationship online, just on Zoom. But I think that we managed to work around it, and over time we really did build quite solid, foundational, trusting relationships, and we are where we are now because we kind of pushed through those challenges. And I think that's probably the thing that I'm most proud of, that we continue to be kind of relationship focused, values focused, principled, focused on kind of trauma informed and trauma responsive work, whilst we were doing something new and creative in a time of a global pandemic. It's looking back, it's pretty phenomenal what we managed to achieve, and it's down to everyone in this room already.
Hey, Matt.
Hi, sorry to join so late.
That's okay. We are working our way through some of the questions that Adria had for us, and I think we've kind of covered what we did, COVID impact, etc., and we're kind of into the space of impact, results, talking about success. What happened? Yeah, would that be okay? Yeah, does that sound about right? So I can say a few things, and then again we'll just keep throwing it out there for people to come in. So I think, you know, in terms of what the minimum of what we wanted to achieve through this, I think we absolutely achieved it. You know, there were policies that were co-produced through this mechanism of legislative theatre that have been adopted in regional government strategy, and, you know, not just one or two, but we're talking kind of 20 different policy proposals. So on that measure, 100%, you know, really successful. But I think there's kind of two other ways in which I think it's had a real impact and should be really proud of the success, which is around, one, providing kind of this ongoing demonstration of how participatory methods can be used in a strategy and policy space, and kind of breaking down some of the barriers that there might, that we certainly faced whilst trying to run it. You know, we've done some of that legwork now. We've demonstrated that there are different ways that you can build a strategy. They might not always be easy, but there are ways that you can do that are more participatory and then deliver better value. You know, in terms of the input, the experience, the buy-in and the mandate for that piece of work. So I think that's something that you know, we all feel is a real success, and we've seen some of the fruits of that, you know, starting to build in terms of areas wanting to take on legislative theatre practice specifically elsewhere in England and in the UK, but also just co-production more generally. So there's definite you know, evidence of impact there. And then the second kind of area of success, I think, is and maybe, you know, John or others could talk about this in more detail, is that ongoing skills and experience that the Jokers group, who are trained through the process, then bring to work across the region in really kind of delivering the strategy in a number of different ways. So I'll let others talk about that.
Do you want to go first, John, or do you want me to?
You go, Matt. You haven't had a chance to introduce yourself yet.
Yep. So my name is Matt Kidd. I part of the Jokers group and network, and also someone with experience. All that being quite historic now. I haven't used any services since I think 2009, something like that. So I think my perception is this in terms of like success and kind of challenges and ongoing successes and challenges, is that predominantly as a service user, I was only ever asked my opinion if it was to say, we want to do a promotional video, or we want to get across to this VIP how awesome and fantastic we are. So we come out, will you come out and be our poster boy for what a great service we were? And I was always very skeptical of that. And I at the start of my paid employment, I was wheeled out by the probation service to be the bad boy turned good, and was told that I had to do it. And I always felt that was like, it never sat comfortably with me. I mean, I had to do it because I had to put food on the table. So, I didn't say no, and I knew the implications of saying no. So this was something. I mean, before we started doing this, I think we'd made progress in some ways. Anyway, it started to become, kind of. Certainly, the term co-production was already being bandied about, and people were getting more of a kind of an idea of what it should look like in in an ideal world, even if it was very difficult to do it. I think this was the first thing I was involved in where people had more or less complete freedom over how they wanted the narrative of their journey and what's happened to them, where it was completely in their hands to say, like, this is what happened. And actually, like, certainly the ones that I was involved in, no one was saying this service saved my life. In fact, kind of much the opposite most of the time. And kind of that kind of challenge that it puts back to the system, and kind of reclaiming some of that, reclaiming the terms on which you can be involved as someone with lived experience, I think is a success. I think the challenge of that then is like how you begin to communicate with people the parameters of what's going to happen next. So it's like probably for the first time in people's lives, you've got across, actually, this is how I was like, kind of harmed or wronged by the system. And it's like you get this big buzz at the end of it, and it's like, oh my God, that's amazing. And like, it's a really emotional experience with a lot of people that we work with. And then it's like, but there's all these like big logistical structural barriers that are in place to actually bring those changes about. And I think communicating that bit has been difficult. But like, I think people are developing skills in how we do that as a result of it. Like we're all learning around this stuff together. It is, it's kind of new ground, and like some of those aftermath conversations about how what had kind of taken place was what the next steps were. I found incredibly difficult and incredibly challenging, because it's like there was this big cathartic moment. So we finally got it out there, like what our lives were actually like, to like, well, this is kind of actually kind of quite difficult to bring about changes in relation to this. But I think kind of staying together as a network and remaining in communication with the key partners around that is an important skill in itself. And I think in other co-production projects I've been involved in, stuff has just broken down like at those points. And it's not this time. We are, we are still communicating.
Yeah, I was gonna add. Yeah, Tabz, you should talk about that. I think we should, and maybe also kind of the slow burn of ways that we've seen those policy proposals implemented. So I think it kind of, in terms of what Matt's saying, like there's the energy of these events and then the time it takes. It took us from the last play, it took kind of 8 or 9 months for the prevention strategy to be published, and then to keep people engaged throughout that process. But I agree, I think we had 35 actors were part of these 3 plays, and 5 people were co-facilitating, and even more than, and then like hundreds of people saw the plays. So then we were able to keep meeting and keep checking and saying, what's happening with the prevention strategy? Are we going to see our proposals? Are they as specific as we want? How can we stay negotiating? Do we have the resources to keep coming to these meetings? And that to have kind of continued to build momentum until now, where we have this group that's continuing to work to inform the ongoing progress of the strategy, and even to deliver trainings using elements of legislative theater for councils and kind of be present in other participatory processes, is such a huge success and a challenge in participatory processes that I think there's like kind of, I guess, credit to it. I think having that Homelessness Action Network already built and some momentum here around working collaboratively really set the scene for that. And also like maybe working in a really new way, right? And as Matt said, doing something totally different gave us that energy to stay along and see the results even over that long term. But also credit to the local authorities and to the combined authority, because this ongoing process also, and this sort of ongoing negotiation of how we're going to see the outputs of these policy making events, right? And then are we going to see that strategy come into life? That took a lot of time and energy from the combined authority and from the staff working on homelessness. And so I think there was sort of everything about this required a lot of time and ongoing participation and sort of trust, and as Tabz said, relationship building. And I think that doing that in a sort of lengthened process of creating this prevention strategy over more than a year, over these 3 plays with all these people, helped build those muscles that are now ongoing, so that we really have a group that's continuing to work in participatory ways. So those are some of the successes I see, but also the way, Tabz can talk about like the way that funding applications have been written for Greater Manchester using the proposals from the strategy, the way that we're seeing people hired with lived experience of homelessness in the GMCA that directly came from those proposals. Those are some tangible outcomes. And I get really excited by the tangible outcomes of things we could touch immediately and the long-term sort of muscle building of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to follow on from what Katy was saying, like very, very quickly after the legislative theatre process and the launch of the homelessness prevention strategy, we were successful as one of very few areas in England to get some funding that was completely based on the proposals that came out of the prevention strategy and the legislative theatre work. So as has already been mentioned, we've now got a full-time post within Greater Manchester Combined Authority just focused on continuing to build and iterate around participatory methods and co-production. So that post and other officers are still engaged with the legislative theatre work, but we're also exploring like other models and other participatory approaches and making sure that we can embed participatory approaches across Greater Manchester and not just in the homelessness space. So really doing more of that work. And we've also kind of got funding and prioritised our response to lived experience in the workforce. And we've built an infrastructure around that with kind of paid for roles that people are in with lived experience of homelessness and other multiple disadvantage, and also kind of various traineeships for people to go into. And that came directly from the policies from legislative theatre as well. So there's loads more I can mention, but those are just a few examples too.
I wonder if we use the last few minutes just to all say something about like the reflection, because the last question I really like, which is about, you know, would you what would be your reflection or advice for other political leaders who are thinking about this or have doubts about opening up spaces of deliberation participation? Would you recommend legislative theatre? So that might be a nice thing to end on. Nadia, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I do, because I think there's just one really, really powerful point that's missing. And I don't know if anybody else felt it, but I know that I feel like that within the space of legislative theatre and the whole process, we broke through like a hierarchy as well. So no one came with titles. It wasn't, oh, well, you know, this is the mayor and this is, you know, this is their title and this is the CEO of this business and they're going to be in the audience. Nobody cared for the titles of people. It was, I am me and you are you, and I'm here to listen and we're here to make change together, and you're an actor and I'm an audience member and I'm a facilitator, and we are a network right now in this very space, whether we're together in the space or we're online, we're a network, and just hierarchies were completely gone. Nobody ever felt like, oh, that person's higher up than me and they're making me feel like this. It was, we're a team, and you didn't realize you became a team when you walked in the door, but then you left as a team. You know, you're part of the legislative theatre team, whether you were part of the actual play or you were part of the audience. Katy mentioned it before, you know, there was 100 people in the audience, but now we're a team and we know them, and it's never, we never feel a sense of disconnection. We always feel like, oh, you know, we're that team and we're still part of what's happening. So I really wanted to mention that, because you don't hear of that, especially in a creative space. When you're bringing creatives together and you're bringing policymakers together, you don't hear of the hierarchy. But what then happens is you watch each other bloom within that space. And I just think that's a very beautiful aspect of the relationship that is built without any premeditation. We don't premeditate this relationship, but it happens in such a beautiful way, and then it continues in a way which I think everybody has kind of nourished in some way, within their own job roles or within their creative mindset. There's some sort of nourishment that legislative theatre gives. And I hope that answers the last question, but I just wanted to kind of put that in there because I just feel like it's very, very important to be aware of our space and what our space can do.
So I guess I have kind of either a good cop and a bad cop response to this, or alternatively a support and challenge kind of response to this. A challenge is very much if you're in a policy-making position or any position of power and you don't want to open up like who gets to contribute, you don't want to make the process more democratic, you don't want to kind of change, why are you in the job that you're in? I guess like the support around that is kind of acknowledging that it can be scary, and I guess like kind of Nadia's give you like lots of the kind of warm glow experiences that people tend to have as a result of working in a different way. I most of the people that I've worked with, when they've actually made the genuine effort to do co-production and overcome their anxieties, have kind of found it quite transformative, kind of much more often than not in a positive way as well. It's like, kind of quite liberating as well. So yeah, that's my support and challenge response.
I would build on that challenge, which is around making things more democratic. And I think it's really easy for political leaders and officers and civil servants to lean back against the political processes that we already have. So our leaders are voted in. We have free and open elections, and they then have a mandate to deliver. And I think it's very easy for them to lean back against that mandate and say, I've done all of the kind of gathering of views, I've done all of that thinking already, and now I'm here and I'm going to do it how I want to do it. And I think what we're asking for and what we're advocating for through this mechanism and others is for political leaders to see the democratic process is something that needs to continue through policy making and through legislation building, not just up until the point of election and representation.
Should I go? I've got a couple of things. So the first one would be brave. I think it took a lot of bravery actually to go through this process, especially in a global pandemic, where there was a lot of other priorities, budget pulls, etc., etc. But reflecting back, you cannot build the solutions or a new prevention strategy without the people that are impacted by the system. And I think if people from the conference take one thing away, it's be brave, and it's absolutely worth it. Everybody wants to make change. People are sometimes restricted by their roles, politics, their power and privilege, but working across experiences in participatory ways, in democratic ways, is absolutely the best way and the best chance you're going to have of making that change as well. The other thing is, it is a process. It's not perfect, and it's never going to be perfect, because it's about bringing a lot of different humans with a lot of different experiences and different views of the world together in spaces, and trying to kind of build it forward and make that change. And it shouldn't stop with the tool, it should continue after that. So some of the work that we did after was actually rewriting the strategy in a more accessible way with the legislative theatre group, so that we continued that relationship that wasn't necessarily using legislative theatre, but it was continuing those relationships that were formed through the process as well, which I think is a great impact. So yeah, I'll leave you on, it's all about relationships. They absolutely take time, they take effort, they take reflection from everyone involved, removal of ego as much as possible, and acknowledgement of power and privilege. And if you don't have those kind of fundamental things, it's really, really hard to move it forward. But give it a go, be brave. It's a process, it's about relationships, and go for it.
Okay, I'll be really quick. I love what you said, Tabz, and I'll just echo. I think bringing together kind of what Nadia was saying and what you were saying is, you know, there's something about doing things in such a different way, and what John was saying, using art, using creativity, using theater, that can help people, whether they notice it or not, step away from their ego or their roles or their titles or the traditional hierarchy of democracy and of policy making, right? And what we lean back on, as Molly said. So there's something about tricking ourselves through a really, really different way of working that can then build that kind of relationship. And as you said, the most important impact to me is that we see 20 plus policies in the strategy that maybe are more responsive, and I think better than we would have gotten otherwise, right? And have been proven by then winning money and funds for that kind of action for the GMCA, right? But also, as you say, Tabz, that this group is continuing to work together and inform that it's not one process, it's not a beginning and end of a participatory democracy process. It's about building an ongoing network of strong engagement that is going to continue dealing with hierarchies and challenges and boundaries and borders, as Matt was talking about. But I guess can we trick ourselves into getting around some of those traditional barriers to participatory policy making and participatory democracy through a different process? So that's what I encourage folks to think about. John, do you have anything to wrap it up?
Yeah, I think it's on that and what Matt touched on earlier about the why not when it comes to like positive social change. And it goes to when Tabz was talking about funding. So when you get to speak to the why haven't we seen the change we've seen and money's attached, you get to the position where talking about that undermines your ability to speak in the future, because we're kind of like doomed to everything has to be fantastic and everybody's got to progress from this. And I think the experiential element of what we're doing makes that pretense less useful, but it's still like a really difficult invitation to like openly engage with your own limitations and your own complicity. But once you do, doing anything less than that feels really hollow. And that last bit would be the like policy and politics right now needs things that ring true. And if we don't have that, like, the collapse of things is going to be just deafening chaos of nothing.
Was that all right?
I feel like that's all that needed to be said.
Absolutely. End of. I love that. Mic drop, John.
Mic drop.
Do you still want us at your conference?
Of course. Really interesting, and it feels the energy that you have. That's so important. It's really this energy and commitment. So of course, we expect it, all of you. So thank you very much. I don't know if someone else wants to make a final word, but it's have been really, really, really interesting.
I think
Katy.
I was going to say I don't have any final words. I think, John, just to say, Nadia Masood just messaged that her Wi-Fi went out and she apologizes. That's not but yeah, I think we're excited. Okay, final words is that we're excited to learn from the other methodologies and continue to integrate. And if anything, I think a message is that there's a really growing energy and commitment, as you say, to participatory processes in Greater Manchester. And so this is one way of doing that we've found to be a really great kickstart. And there's so many more ways. And so we're excited at the conference and in the network of IOPD to kind of be inspired also. And so it'll be great for some of us to be there and hear from the other candidates and the special mentions too, who just look like amazing projects. So it's an honor to be among those finalists. So yeah, thank you.
Nadia, I think
I just want to say it's good to embrace the good, the bad, the ugly, the really, really, really bad, the walls that you just can't break down because people, like Matt mentioned, are just not willing to. But it's good as an individual to embrace that and be like, okay, what can I take from it? And how can I bring that into my space, and how can I bring it into other spaces? So I think that's very important, just to embrace it all, because not everything's pretty, not everything's got roses and fairy lights, and we did have to embrace some things as well. So I think I really want to add that, because I feel like to make out something's a walk in the park, it's not. Sometimes some of us needed our hands held a little bit to be like, oh wow, this is really, really, really hard. But then sometimes it's like, okay, how can we get past this hurdle together? And what are the alternative? What way can we try this? Can we try this? So I think being an individual who's willing to embrace, and you're with a team of people that are willing to embrace to the point where they're willing to get rid of policies that have been there for years and be like, no, I don't want that anymore. That takes a lot. Tabz said before, bravery, but it's bravery within yourself and bravery to stand up against the system, and I think that's what all of us here are doing. And anyone who is wanting to co-produce or democracy, you're standing up against the system, and you have to be brave to do that, and you have to have some confidence somewhere to be like, well, I'm willing to do that. So I just wanted to add that in.
Thank you very much. So really thank you to all for this, for sharing your thoughts, your experience, and really, as I said, this energy and this commitment. So it's really, really nice to see you all and to see this energy and this power. So I don't know if I think it has been a long interview. So I think it's great and it's very useful, really. So thank you all of you. I hope to see you all in Grenoble in less than 1 month. So you have my email. So if you have any questions, any doubt, don't hesitate to write me. And yeah, thank you very much. Have a lovely day and see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.